right, we start with breaking news at 7 o'clock. Live pictures of the White House just down the road from us on Pennsylvania Avenue. As we speak, the president is welcoming the Prime Minister of Japan for a star-studded state dinner. But people are nervous at the White House, perhaps understandably so, about the economy. The latest inflation report spells, no matter how you cut it, big trouble for President Biden. The stock market fell steeply in response to the report this morning. You can see the Dow down 1%, the market as a whole down a little less than that. Here is the president's reaction to those terrible economic numbers.
We have dramatically reduced inflation from 9% down to close to 3%. We're in a situation where we're better situated than we were when we took office, where inflation was skyrocketing. And we have a plan to deal with it, whereas the opposition, my opposition, talks about two things. They just want to cut taxes for the wealthy and raise taxes on other people.
Welcome to the Ferris Show on television. First tonight, if you look at this week, you will figure out whether 2024 is going to be an abortion election or an economy election. Right now, as you think about Americans just having had dinner, 1 in 10 Americans report skipping meals to pay for a place to live. 1 in 10. That number is likely higher in reality, but those are people who say they actively skip meals to make their rent or mortgage payments. On the other hand, more than 3 million women in Arizona now have to abide by a law written during the height of the Civil War about abortion. That is the state of play in America 209 days from the election. We're going to get to abortion and how it's a political anchor for Republicans a little later in the show. But first, what is affecting all of us, no matter where you live on a daily basis, is the never-ending rise in prices. The latest report shows what we've been saying all along. Inflation is like cancer. It spreads slowly, and it is very, very hard to kill. The cost of food, medical care, shelter, maintaining your car, they're all up compared to last year. Now, inflation is up again today. That means that prices are continuing to rise faster. We've not even gotten anywhere close to when prices start going down. If you're one of the 78% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, the news is absolutely devastating. You can see the red numbers going up over and over and over again. High inflation means grocery prices and other items will keep getting more expensive faster. Now, that's the bad news. Now, for the really bad news with these numbers, the idea of an interest rate cut. That means the Federal Reserve lowering interest rates, so that would lower house, car, and credit card payments. Well, these rising numbers make that lower interest rate that a lot of people were counting on, that President Biden was counting on, a lot less likely to happen. And that's a big problem if you consider the sacrifices are already made by Americans every day to afford a home. 22% are skipping meals, 20% are picking up extra shifts, or even selling their belongings. 17% have gone through their life savings, their retirement savings. And that's why the magic number to retire, according to most Americans, is now $1.4 million. Far, far out of reach. You want to talk about things going up? That number to retire has gone up over $500,000 in just the past couple of years. As you heard earlier, President Biden says he has a plan to kill inflation. And to be fair, it's down significantly since the peak. In other words, prices are rising slower, although they are still rising. His former chief of staff, Ron Klain, argues the president's message isn't landing. Audio obtained by Politico quotes Ron Klain as saying President Biden does 2 or 3 events a week where he's cutting a ribbon on a bridge. You go to the grocery store and you know eggs and milk are expensive. The fact that there's a blank bridge is not. You be the judge about the blank and the last word in that sentence. Like it or not, President Biden's going to have to battle the headlines about runaway inflation. But it's a lot bigger than just the headlines and a number of 3.5%. 3.5% of inflation doesn't really mean anything to you at home. It only means things to economists. What matters to all of us is how we feel. how you feel when you go to the grocery store and buy eggs, how you feel trying to put gas in your car, how you feel at the end of the week, whether you can afford to take your wife or family out for a meal, how you feel when you're paying the mortgage. Right now, the economy is the top issue for voters. Voters in key swing states, of course, are going to decide the election. And they trust the former president more than the current president on the issue of inflation in the economy. And when Americans are choosing between a meal and a roof over their head, comments like this from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez certainly put things into perspective. And there's legitimate arguments on both sides, but here she is talking about the perks of Biden's student loan forgiveness plan.
People getting the student loan forgiveness, their student loans canceled, it means that, it's hope to buy a house or have a kid or travel abroad or maybe even go back to school and pursue a career that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have.
So maybe they could take out even more student loans. Geraldo Rivera is here, NewsNation correspondent at large, Peabody Award-winning journalist. Geraldo, is this the quiet part out loud? The joke's on all of us, right? Taxpayers pay for college loan forgiveness, so people who went to college can now go to Europe?
Good point. And I read your newsletter. It's excellent. I appreciate the data that you present. I thought, full stop, that it was all about abortion, the most visceral of issues in my regard. Clearly, you've seen in the midterms and since how it became the swing issue, and I think it still has the ability to be that. What Arizona, the craziness of bringing back this just
your point on abortion is well made. We'll get to it with Eric Erickson a little bit later in the show, but abortion affects a certain amount of people, and you're right, it's a swing issue. Some people are extraordinarily passionate about it, but if you're skipping meals and you're hungry to pay your mortgage, that's a different issue. I thought what President Biden said, he said, I've got a plan, right? And a big part of that is EVs, banning gas stoves, all of this move to clean energy. This is from Bloomberg. Electricity up 5% since last year. Cost of electricity is up 27% since January 2021. Experts believe the prices will only keep increasing with time. There is no relief here. And again, do college loan forgiveness so people can go on European vacations. Let's raise electricity prices so elites and college graduates can drive their Teslas. How does that plan work for the people who are skipping meals to pay their mortgage?
True, and you couch it in very emotional, very emotional context. I believe the visceral issue, the most visceral issue, abortion, then immigration, I thought would be, certainly has been in the lead up till now, the big issue. But inflation is uniquely powerful for the traditional Democratic constituency. And every time you drive your car, you pass the gas station, and you see that here in Ohio, for instance, it's $3.40 for a gallon of unleaded regular. So you can see inflation at work. The one bone that I have to pick is that it hasn't been a straight line. There has been a precipitous drop. You did mention it. We're 60% off the high in inflation. It really has gone down. What is so concerning is the fear that mortgage rates will go up. Housing will be less affordable, and housing, I know, is a huge issue, and being unhoused, nothing is more visceral than that. So I think that, if the stock market goes down, it's not just rich people who are affected because of rates going up, and the ability to borrow a mortgage for first-time buyers particularly becomes more impossible. The ability goes down. Then I think that Joe Biden's name and face is all over that, and I believe, to your headline, that this is the one issue, inflation, that if it does continue to go up from this spike that we've seen since February 3.2, now 3.5. If that continues, another report next month, another one after that, and if it keeps going up, That's all she wrote.
Oh, James Carville, right? It's the economy.
Suffer the consequences.
Yeah. Oh, James Carville. It's the economy.
I think it will. It could very well become the economy.
Okay.
Stupid.
All right. So I appreciate you reading more notes. Thank you very much. We've dealt with in the newsletter a lot about it being about feels, right? You know, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Yes.
I can show you statistics to show anything. And you pointed out, inflation is down 60%, on and on and on. Another issue about how people feel is about crime.
Figures don't lie, but liars figure.
No, I like that. All right. With attribution, with attribution, I will use that. Another thing that people feel is crime. They feel unsafe. They feel things are out of control. Last time you and I were on was when Joe Biden was in New York. He was there for a big fundraiser. Donald Trump went to visit the widow of a fallen NYPD officer. Here's part of our conversation.
They better heed my warning. Mourn this cop or feel my wrath. This cannot go unheeded. You cannot let a cop be killed 10 miles from this event and just count the greenbacks. It's bigger than that. What do you want to run for, President Biden? You called the widow great. Everybody should be wearing a black band if they should give them out at that thing. This should be about that cop.
All right, as far as we know, since then, March 28th, he hasn't called the widow and he has not said Jonathan Diller's name. There's a point to be made here, though. Is this just full-on Democrats and Joe Biden abandoning the typical working-class Democratic base, and they're the party of the elites, of those who go to vacation in Europe with college debt relief, and that's just the way politics in America are now?
But the Democrats that he is seeking now, the votes he's seeking now, of course he wants them all, but the votes he's after particularly right now are union labor. That's why he opens a bridge and they'll be opening a Francis Scott Key second bridge in Baltimore, hopefully before too long, before too many years have passed. But he wants to build stuff. He wants to put people to work. He wants the old school Life magazine Democrats to be in his corner again. He wants the United Auto Workers in his corner. And he'll gamble that the lower end, the people who are, not eating so they can pay rent, will either they don't vote anyway or they won't be the significant constituency that will put a Democrat back or keep a Democrat in the White House. I think that's a tremendous gamble, particularly in a context of raising inflation. This has the potential of really dooming his presidency. Going back to the death of the cop and the mourning that I did not perceive nearly sufficient for the profound loss. He has to pay attention to crime and punishment because of the same. It is a visceral issue.
It's how you feel.
It is a gut-wrenching issue. It's an issue it's how you feel about it. And I think that he has to be very astute and nimble. And one of the reasons he's not getting, or he's made a little comeback based on his performance.
I got to run. I feel like nimble is not a word that has been used to describe Joe Biden in a very long time. But I don't know. You did. There we go. I got to run. Good to see you, Geraldo. Thank you.
You too.
As worried as people are about inflation, right? And inflation is paying their mortgages and your bills and trying to pay your car insurance, put food on the table. There's a lot of Americans turning away from colleges and college loans and back to trade school. Enrollment for construction schooling is up 23%, while college enrollment has gone down 6%. It comes at a time when the industry needs trade workers the most. There's a huge demand for construction workers to build all those bridges. 500,000 workers are needed to meet the demand, on top of their normal hiring pace. By 2027, more than 550,000 plumbers are needed in America. And through 2032, hiring for electricians is expected to grow twice as fast as other jobs. This is the dot-com era of the trades. And with demand comes benefits. If you take a mining or logging job, you can make $1,800 a week. Construction workers, $1,400 a week. Last week, I spoke with Mike Rowe, the host of Dirty Jobs, about the need for trade workers and how their demand and how the demand for them changes the value set for Americans. Did the folks who are now taking these trade jobs up, even though they're making good money, master electrician, $180,000 a year, some roughnecks, $100,000 a year and more, Are they staying with working class traditional values or joining the values and politics of, shall we say, the elites who are making similar money?
That's an interesting question. I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but my foundation specifically awards work ethic scholarships because we don't want to start the conversation simply with qualifications or with grade point averages or with whatever your pedigree is. We want men and women who are enthused about showing up early and staying late and distinguishing themselves. That's a very unattractive narrative by and large today.
All right, Mike's going to join Chris Cuomo tonight for Trading Up, special live studio audience, along with the blue-collar millionaires who found success without a college degree, all hour, 8 p.m. Eastern, only on NewsNation. When you're lonely, you eat, and when you are obese, you don't want to leave the house. It's a dangerous cycle. The pandemic made it worse. Is Big Pharma the answer, or is there something else? And Biden tries to turn the table on Republicans when it comes to the border. If you propose the same thing as Trump, but your last name is Biden, will the response be any different?
Do you think a doctor should be punished who perform abortions?
Let that be to the states. You know, everything we're doing now is states and states' rights. And what we wanted to do is get it back to the states.
We've all had our moments, happens to me sometimes, of feeling lonely. Happens even to some really important people. They say being president's the loneliest job in the world. And of course, then there's famous TV anchor Ron Burgundy.
Baxter! Papa's home. There he is. There's my little man. You're okay? Of course I met a lady tonight. This one was different. I have to be honest. Quite different. What? I'm lonely? I'm not lonely. I'm beloved by everyone in San Diego.
Apparently, being lonely can lead you to eat enough to become obese. New article in the publication Brain Tomorrow. And we checked, yes, this is a real publication. How loneliness can lead to food addiction and then obesity. It makes sense, right? The study says UCL health researchers suggest that loneliness can lead people to unhealthy eating habits. When taking brain scans of women who identified as lonely, researchers saw increased activity in the areas associated with appetite and hunger, along with studies showing half of all Americans feeling measurable feelings of loneliness. You combine those two, and there's the problem. Gail Saltz is here, clinical associate professor of psychiatry, New York Presbyterian Hospital, is with us now. They really had to study this?
You know, we do need to understand the impact on the brain in terms of loneliness. Why? Well, it's a public health epidemic if you listen to the Surgeon General now. And the group that it's newly affecting the most are young adults. So we're not just talking about aging people who are alone. And it has huge ramifications in terms of its impact on the brain. This is one that does not surprise me because it also, we know, can cause clinical depression, can cause anxiety disorders, can increase the risk of alcohol and substance abuse. And so no surprise, yes, it can impact systems that have to do with reward, which is food. Evolutionarily speaking, we were meant to be together with groups of people and have bonds. That's how we survived. And when that was at risk, we looked for other resources, and food is a big resource. So again, not surprising, but it also was interesting that it decreased centers' abilities that have to do with willpower. So just saying,
okay.
Hey,
no, it makes sense, right?
Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work to just say, don't do it. We have to come up with
lonely every day, 10%, lonely once a week, 30%, lonely every day or several times a week, 30%, which I guess at some point you add all that up, you get to 70%. That's a lot of lonely folks in the world. And you make a great point. Heart disease, dementia, stroke, depression, anxiety all go up. One of the great cures for loneliness, for depression, for anxiety, for heart disease, for obesity, for not eating too much is all working out. And all the new data is showing that in some cases, working out and physical activity is as effective as taking drugs, especially for lower level cases. And I'm wondering when we're reading all these studies and when we're talking about them, if we're not giving effectively the old-fashioned cure, the natural cure, enough credit and enough willingness to tell people, look, stop being lonely, get out and go work out, go for a walk, go do things, rather than, hey, it's not your fault, you're lonely, sit at home and take this drug.
Well, I would like to say the answer is somewhere in the middle. I would like to say that psychoeducation should be telling people that, in fact, there are great benefits to aerobic exercise. 3 to 4 times a week, 30 minutes, get your heart rate up. And as you said, can go head-to-head with medication from mild to moderate clinical depression, not severe depression. So it's important for people to understand that. But I would also say, just saying, hey, get over being lonely by going out and exercising, that actually won't work. So I think we have to give them other tools in addition to deal with loneliness, because loneliness is about having just a few people that you feel really intimately connected with and you can be vulnerable with. And how do we do that? We have to put more of an emphasis on forming communities, on it's okay to be vulnerable. We're not at that point now. We have no conflict resolution abilities, so we have to work on things like that.
People don't enjoy being told some of those things, as you point out. Gail, we got to run. Thank you very much. When Republicans talk about abortion, whether you agree with them or not, they lose. It's just that simple.
Do you think a doctor should be punished who perform abortions?
I'll let that be to the states. You know, everything we're doing now is states and states' rights. And what we wanted to do is get it back to the states.
What Republicans could and need to talk about to win, famed political consultant Eric Erickson is with us. Today, President Biden revealed his spring offensive to checkmate Republicans. For the very first time in his 3.5 years as president, he now says he's looking into taking executive action at the border. Interestingly enough, he made the statement in an interview with Spanish-speaking TV Univision.
We're examining whether or not I have that power. I would have that power under the legislation when the border has over 500,000 people, 5,000 people a day trying to cross the border because you can't manage it, slow it up. There's no guarantee that I have that power all by myself without legislation. And some have suggested I should just go ahead and try it. And if I get shut down by the court, I get shut down by the court. But we're trying to work through that right now.
He pretty much does have the power, but that's a different issue. Been a record number of migrant crossings under the Biden administration, 7.2 million people. That's more than the combined populations of Wyoming, Vermont, Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Delaware, Rhode Island, and Montana, who have all come here illegally during the Biden administration. And it's crushing Mr. Biden in the polls. According to a Wall Street Journal piece, Wall Street Journal poll, 52% of Americans think President Trump is best able to handle immigration and border security. Compare that to 32% who would pick Mr. Biden. Who knows if the executive orders will help, but no doubt the media will cover it like it does because the numbers, if the orders are done correctly, will go down. It's that simple. They went down during the Trump administration under the same orders. And on top of that, President Biden keeps getting help on abortion. It's a political anchor around the neck of Republicans. Geraldo explained that earlier. As we predicted last night, all major news networks led with it. You can see the screen grabs of the broadcasts of Norah O'Donnell, David Muir, and Lester Holt all breathlessly covered the breaking news from Arizona last night and also covered it again tonight. The state Supreme Court there reinstated an 1864 abortion ban. So President Biden can count not only on the border possibly being helped and the media telling that story, plus abortion, and the incontrovertible truth of politics. Never underestimate Republicans' ability to screw things up. The impeachment of DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is a mess. Their promised investigation of Joe Biden and impeachment is a disaster. Once again, Republicans are likely to go through a brutal House Speaker fight because of self-inflicted wounds. And they're going to get embarrassed on funding for Ukraine and Israel. Eric Erickson is here, host of the Eric Erickson Show, author of the best political newsletter in the conservative world. Show notes, I would suggest all subscribe. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, you might say, how was the play? There's a Friday press conference now planned for the former president and the Speaker of the House on election integrity. So I guess relitigating 2020 We'll have to see if that works, a ninth time and fails?
Right. I'm not exactly sure what the GOP intends to do. They have a real problem on abortion, to your point. And the guy who figured it out for him is Glenn Youngkin in Virginia. The Republicans in Virginia all got on the same page, 15-week ban, exceptions for rape, life of the mother, incest, and it neutralized the Democrats with the issue. Now, they still lost in Virginia, and so people have kind of overlooked it. But it actually neutralized that issue in Virginia. It turned out a majority of Virginia voters supported 15-week ban with exceptions, and it completely knocked out the Democrats on their ability to do that. The thing that helped the Democrats in Virginia was Republicans didn't show up for early voting. Had the Republicans actually showed up for early voting, they would have held the House and probably taken the Virginia Senate. So there is a path. The GOP has one. It's just hurting the cats to get there. And part of the problem, frankly, is as a pro-lifer who's fringed with a lot of the pro-life movement, for years the message was Roe v. Wade should have never happened. This should be a state-level issue. So the Supreme Court says, okay, and now they're like, whoa, it shouldn't be a state-level issue. We should have a federal uniform law. It kind of has muddied the water on the right, and no one's leading on the issue.
Look, and you made a point in Virginia where you said Republicans figured it out. They still lost, right? Glenn Youngkin didn't get the state legislatures that he wanted. What I can't figure out, Eric, look, you're a political consultant, okay? Why can Republicans not figure out messaging? Forget abortion. Okay, Democrats don't like talking about immigration. They don't talk about it. Why can't Republicans, and I'll maybe ask you this, what should Republicans be talking about? How should they figure out how to talk about inflation?
Yeah, that's it. Inflation and crime should be the only things the GOP talks about. You've got the economy, people falling behind. You had Janet Yellen just the other day saying actually more Americans are benefiting. Then the inflation numbers come out, and it turns out inflation's going back up. You may not get the interest rate cut. You may get an interest rate increase. This is Bidenomics, Joe Biden's economy. Yes, the GOP should be focusing on those things. The problem is when you're led by someone who has no impulse control, it trickles down to everyone else. Why come up with a message when Donald Trump's just going to blow it up so no one even tries?
Okay, so even still, though, why don't Republicans and why don't they at least try to become more disciplined on the issue of talking about things that voters actually care about rather than among their press conferences? And this is Mike Johnson's choice, right? Election integrity.
In large part, I think we're going to see the winners and losers separate later this year over that issue. You'll see very disciplined Republican candidates win seats that do focus on the economy and crime, and you'll see less disciplined Republicans lose because they can't come up with a comprehensive message. It is still early. The thinking from a lot of consultants on the Republican and the Democratic side is no one's really paying attention. They're only just starting to. We're about to get into summer vacation. We've got time. The problem is people have so many things to pay attention to. These little nuggets do begin to set in as earworms, and people have a hard time getting past them. So they need a comprehensive message now. But when you have a 2-seat majority in the House, the former president's distracted by indictments. There's no leader anyone trusts. Everything goes awry.
I'm still getting a visual on earworms, but hopefully everyone's had dinner who's watching. You think about how President Biden is going to deal with immigration if he wanted to, right? Bring back remain in Mexico, curb asylum, which he can do with executive orders. And we understand, right, that it's not going to actually fix the border problem because the border crisis isn't at the border. It's inside the United States, right, with infrastructure issues, with hospitals, with schools, with police departments, with crime, with wages being depressed, on and on and on and on. But the media will report over and over again, hey, look, the border numbers are down. Will that be enough to inoculate the president on this and thus really hurt Republicans?
No, because it has to do with the people who are already here. And you know, there is this interesting juxtaposition. Joe Biden thinks he can unilaterally forgive student loans, but somehow doesn't have the power to secure the border as the commander in chief. Interesting juxtaposition. Not that the Republicans will play that up, of course, but when you have so many illegal aliens in the country already, and the stories continue to come out about people who are dying or being robbed or injured because of illegal aliens, it's too late. The president, I think, for a long time didn't do this because he was afraid the GOP would turn on him and say, why didn't you do it sooner? They're going to do that. It's a legitimate argument. At the same time, he's got to do something. The reason he did this on Univision is because the number one issue for Hispanic voters in America is immigration. They don't like illegal immigration, despite the large immigration groups in the country being led by Hispanics saying, yes, they do. No, they don't. They're moving to Donald Trump because of it. This is all about the polling.
Look, and one of the reasons is because illegal immigrants are taking the jobs of legal immigrants and of people who have already come, and they're worried about it. And they're moving into their communities and everything else. Eric, great conversation as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
You might remember last year, President Biden's State of the Union speech included a promise to end airline bag fees. And it's not his fault, but they have not ended yet. Since the glory days of aviation, things have gotten worse, not better in the air, of course. Now there's this. A man posted on X, formerly Twitter, about his view for a 4-hour flight. You can see a couple legs locked in the middle of a sky-high, and this is what the teleprompter says, spooning session. I think the kids call it Netflix and chill these days. People acting like this is a far cry from how flying was billed in the 50s and 60s.
You can hightail it on Eastern's new 727 jetliner to Washington, Philadelphia, and Boston. And a unique new dining service is worth writing home about. Choose from a selection of superb entrees like lobster Newburg, filet mignon with Bordelaise sauce, prepared as you like it. Eastern 727 jet, quiet as a library. The smartest way to leave town?
Those were the days. Just back to the barefoot canoodlers for a second. Maybe we could find their travel agent, because I don't know about you, but when was the last time you were on a plane with an open middle seat? Maybe canoodle all you want if I'm not going to be squished. Flying used to be a big deal, right? People dressed to the nines almost like they would for church. You saw the ads. Over time, that's changed. Airport lines today are filled with people in pajamas and yoga pants. Some clearly haven't showered. Let's look at how far we've come in just the past several years. As recently as 2016, a majority of Americans used to think airlines should be able to remove passengers who dress inappropriately. That's what people were polling. In 2024, we're writing articles about how much PDA is too much for an airplane. It's what you call progress, I guess, or some people call progress. So why does all of this matter? Well, politics are downstream of culture. You want to know why our politics have become so divisive and so vitriolic, with no care for standards or norms or decency? We literally have no respect for each other. We do this on airplanes in front of everybody else, so politicians kind of act the same way. There is progress, though, worth celebrating. When it comes to flying, adjusted for inflation, and flying now is about 1/7 the cost of the 1970s. That's something to celebrate. The next time you fly and pay a baggage fee, and even have to sit next to people who are canoodling, it's a lot cheaper to get around the country. There you go. New reports that we're about to see a lot more of Melania Trump on the campaign trail. Is she really the secret weapon Team Trump thinks she is? But here's a question that will get your attention. Will Melania be there? Hillary Clinton stood by former President Bill Clinton, even through the Monica Lewinsky scandal. Countless other political wives have walked the courthouse steps. We saw Melania this weekend at John Paulson's $110 million Palm Beach mansion for her husband's fundraiser. Kate Glassman Bennett covered Melania during her time as First Lady, wrote the book, Free Melania, an unauthorized biography. Is she going to be there?
No.
Hard pass. That's not.
If I know anything about Melania, having covered her for many years, no, she will not be there. And let me just say this. This is one of the things I really respect about Melania, is that she did not ever, nor does she now, play the role of the typical political spouse. You know, when Stormy Daniels happened, for instance, she wasn't there, by his side. She was angry. She took that separate vehicle to the State of the Union, which has never been done. I think this is not publicity that she wants to get into.
All right. So, and there was the famous, I
really don't care, do you?
The jacket, okay. Someone did say if she did show up, what jacket would she wear if she walked into the courthouse? But in a larger sense, and we put up some of the pictures, and to be fair, she was a different First Lady than anybody else. You covered her and realized, former model, extraordinarily elegant, had sort of a sense of grace and class and touch that people compared to Jackie O in a very different way. The Guardian declared her Melania Trump campaign's secret weapon. If she does decide to get back in the game, is there a role to play?
Absolutely. And I respect Arwa saying that in her piece. The issue is this happens every time with Melania, and she doesn't. So 2016, 2020, and now again. And to be fair, she is going to be at a fundraiser, and she did appear this weekend at that other fundraiser, and she's doing something with Log Cabin Republicans. But that's at Mar-a-Lago. So it's literally her walking downstairs, right, to go to this event. And I'm not saying that in a disparaging way, but she has never liked the campaign trail.
Right.
In fact, when I wrote my book about her, several sources said they just stopped asking her to make appearances because the answer would be no. And it's because she's private. It's because she doesn't want the scrutiny. And I think she sort of saves her appearances for the convention or for, really sort of blockbuster moments. But she is not an active campaigner, which I will say is disappointing because first ladies typically are secret weapons for presidents.
You think so? This is interesting, right? Unfavorable ratings of first ladies: Joe Biden 29%, Laura Bush 20%. I don't know how you couldn't like Laura Bush. Hillary Clinton 39%, Nancy Reagan 23%, Melania Trump 47%. How do people dislike someone so much who is so unseen?
Well, I think this is towards the end of Trump's presidency, and I think there was just the sort of carryover from his presidency, January 6th.
She doesn't really care.
And I don't think she cares. I do think, first ladies typically have a stance, a project, something that they care about. I don't think people really ever got into Be Best, which was her platform. And then towards the end of Trump's presidency, she sort of disappeared. She did fewer and fewer events, and she didn't get involved in any of the sort of nastiness of that last campaign. I remember I traveled with her to do one campaign appearance, and I want to say it was within maybe 10 days.
You think part of it is because people treated her so poorly?
I think she doesn't like the scrutiny, but I also think she just didn't want to. And again, it's like this is what I sort of respect about Melania Trump is that she does what she wants to do and what she's comfortable doing. I think she would be an asset. I think she has a real American story to tell, and she's definitely would help soften the president and talk to him about him in a human way.
Right.
To undecideds, to women, to people who want to donate. But I think this is just something she's chosen to do.
All right.
Stay out of the spotlight.
We'll stay tuned for Monday.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Leland.
Tucker Carlson, Jon Stewart line up squarely behind Hamas. How supporting those that kill became mainstream. When will we finally give up on the idea of peace with terrorists? Killed 3 of the leader of Hamas's sons. They were allegedly on their way to carry out an attack on Israeli soldiers in Gaza. Video shows Ismail Haniyeh responding to the news from where he lives in the luxury of Qatar, saying, "I thank Allah for the honor that my children and grandchildren have been martyred." Allegedly, one of his kids kept some of the hostages. This is very different than grieving Gold Star mothers or Americans who regret that they have but one life to give for their country. American men and women die in battle to save freedom. Hamas seeks to destroy freedom. Hamas's charter calls for a second Holocaust to the Jewish people and to continue the fight from there. There is nothing in the Hamas charter about living in peace. America seeks peace, as does Israel, by the way. Going back to the 1940s, Israel has offered the Arab League, the PLO, Hamas, and anybody who will listen, dozens of peace proposals. They were all rejected, as was a ceasefire proposal a day ago. Hamas says they don't even have 40 living hostages to trade for a ceasefire. They've killed them all, killed hundreds. Hamas seeks destruction, death, rape, and power. That is the political side of militant Islam. Peace with such people, as great as it sounds, is impossible. The late, great Golda Meir knew that. She famously said, "We will have peace with the Arabs when they love their children more than they hate us." President Biden loves to quote Golda Meir. He should remember that. He should remind America of that quote. 6 months into the Israel-Hamas war, latest polling shows 55% of Americans disapprove of Israel's handling of the war. Half of young Americans, maybe more now, are pro-Hamas. In Gregory Peck's 1947 movie, Gentleman's Agreement, Hollywood exposed America's anti-Semitism problem. Back then, letting Jews into hotels or clubs, or not giving them jobs, restricting them, well, that was taboo. Now it's just out in the open. It's not about clubs or hotels anymore. It's about wholesale slaughter. It's not a left or right thing either. It's a right or wrong thing. Here's Jon Stewart comparing Israel defending itself against terrorists to Russia's aggression in Ukraine.
What are we doing here? The subtext of all this is America knows this is wrong, but it apparently doesn't seem to have the courage to say it in a straightforward manner. America and Israel both know that you cannot bomb your way into safety.
Stewart's a smart guy. It's impossible for him to not understand what he is saying. Not to be outdone, of course, Tucker Carlson interviewed a Christian pastor in Bethlehem, a town fully controlled by the Palestinians for almost 2 decades, and then blamed Israelis for killing Christians.
If you wake up in the morning and decide that your Christian faith requires you to support a foreign government blowing up churches and killing Christians, I think you've lost the thread.
Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda chief, would be proud. Again, Tucker's a smart guy, yet he's taking the side of terrorists. There's no other explanation than his unabashed hatred of Jews. 20 years ago, we all remember, Stewart exposed Tucker for what he is. That ended Carlson's tenure on CNN's Crossfire. But there is a larger lesson to take. Now 6 months since Hamas attacked Israel, since the hostages were taken. Hamas has been exposed for what they are. Stewart has been exposed for caving to his liberal viewers. Carlson's been exposed for siding with terrorists. And now in America, and this is the sad part, hating Jews, calling for their destruction, celebrating their rape, it's now okay. It's hard to have peace with people who think that is okay. Big Chris Cuomo special coming up. Here it is.